Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Josh Feldstein, the leader and drummer of the Verve Jazz Ensemble. He talks about their newest 2019 CD, Night Mode. It's their sixth studio album, and it attains maximum liftoff in its effort to make the kind of music that the fans of straight ahead jazz and the Verve Jazz Ensemble have come to expect. The songs are a mix of compelling originals, intriguing interpreted jazz classics, things fans have gotten used to, and some surprises. So please get to know Josh, this band, this project, and dig this interview, my friends.
So let's start off. Let's begin with a bang. Josh, it's always wonderful to catch up. I love the Verve Jazz Ensemble, and I'm very excited to talk about the new project.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on Neon Jazz. We love the work that you're doing, Joe, and it's a pleasure to always be on your program.
Right on. Thank you. And I want to go right into your sixth studio album. And again, every album you put out, the thing that's unique about you guys is that, you're having so much fun at what you're doing, and you just happen to be on the top of the charts with every album. You got your sixth album, Night Mode. Talk to me about, first and foremost, before we get into this album, what it's like to have such good commercial success, which is almost a rarity in the jazz world.
Well, we create music that we enjoy listening to ourselves, and the main objective, really creatively, is to find a way to make our music accessible to people who are both extraordinarily sophisticated in jazz and at the same time completely novice jazz listeners, and find a way, believe it or not, to appeal to both of those audiences at the same time. And what we've found is that there is an enormous amount of interest in accessible jazz in the generation of listeners who have really not been exposed to the music. They may be pop listeners, they may be funk or even rap, R&B. What we have found is that if you create very clearly defined, really enjoyable melodies where there's consistent hooks created in the music, where you've got a very accessible groove, and you have variation musically and melodically and rhythmically from song to song, the listeners flock to the music and they really enjoy it. And so the band moves in that direction, and that really is kind of the vision that we have in terms of creating our art.
So talk to me about this new album, your sixth, Night Mode. It says you're attaining maximum liftoff in your efforts to make a kind of music that fans of straight-ahead jazz crave. But more than that, what was the artistic aim? I know you added a couple new members to the band, so kind of give me an overview.
Well, we moved from that of a quintet from our fifth album to that of a septet, adding a trombone and both a tenor saxophone and a flute with Alexa Tarantino, and trombone with Willie Applewhite. And that is to broaden the overall sound of the band, give it some extra layer of horns on the front, but also allow us to change the configuration of the group, Joe, so that we're playing a variety of different quintet configurations, quartet configurations, even sextet configurations. So the band on this album, if you listen to the various, I think there are 10 tracks. I don't think there's more than 3 tracks that are all 7, and then we have all different configurations of the band. And so what that does is it allows us to create a lot of different sounds, a lot of different textures, a lot of different moods. And it gives the band the ability to move with a very broad palette of variety. Because I tell you the truth, I listen to music, and the one thing that I find challenging is when the second track sounds like the first track and the third track sounds like the second track. And by the time you get to the second or third track, you've lost interest in the music because your ear gets tired. You really get a tired ear. So one of the things that I've always enjoyed doing is creating a wide palette of variation of sound to keep your ear fresh from tune to tune. And that's one of the ways we can do it, by having a larger ensemble and being able to change the configuration.
You know, the one thing that you guys have always done in your band, and I find it very interesting, is that, you know, we have all of these different camps of musicians that are either pushing the envelope, doing avant stuff, incorporating funk and soul, and kind of blending genres to sell albums. But you guys have always stuck within this realm of putting together really good straight-ahead jazz that has a different feel to it, but adheres to the constructs of the jazz that I think was really a driving force in the late 50s and into the mid-60s that really got people to say, man, I love jazz. I'm going to name my kid Miles like I did. Those kinds of things. Do you ever see yourself as kind of this torchbearer of an era, but taking that era to another place?
I think you've articulated it perfectly. And what we've done is stand really on the shoulders of some of the really classic bop, hard bop musicians. We listen to that music with tremendous amount of passion, and you can hear how it's influenced the construction of our musical choices and the way we play and our roots as bop musicians. Because some of those guys, those players were just ridiculous. They were just absolutely ridiculous. Creatively, technically, they were amazing. And at the same time, to your point, we're not afraid to integrate much more contemporary sound into that foundation. On this particular album, I had Matt Ostreicher join us once again, and he wrote a wonderful piece called Per Your Request, which is a funk Latin original composition. We have all kinds of Latin grooves that we've built into a variety of our tunes that also have very strong swing components. We did one tune on this album called Drum Morello, which is a fabulous tune that Joe Morello, the great Joe Morello, wrote. I was fortunate enough to study briefly with Joe, and just one of my drumming idols. He wrote a tune called Drum Morello that was played for, I think it was the 93 or 94 tribute to Buddy Rich, and big band recorded this. Well, it really hasn't gone very far. It was just recorded in that one environment. But when I listened to it, I always loved this tune. And so it was something when I heard the head, I said, you know, although Joe played it straight ahead, we laid down a Latin head, and then it migrates into a straight ahead a groove, and then it goes back to the Latin for the head out. So we're not afraid to mix and match stuff because we think that is an appropriate integration of some of the great stuff that's taking place today, but acknowledges the core of the VJE, which is really that hard bop space.
So if you had a genie that came by and said to you, I want you to put the ideal notion into a listener's head that picks up this CD of what you want them to get from this album, how you want them to feel, perceive, and get this each time they listen to it, what would be the best case scenario for a listener to get out of this album?
First and foremost, they feel good. They listen to this music and they're happy. This is supposed to be a really pleasurable, enjoyable experience. It's supposed to be uplifting. It's supposed to make people enjoy and have a positive framework and positive outlook relative to life. It's one of the important things we think music should bring. Obviously, there's many other palettes that you can bring to art, to music, right? But that's the space that we like to spend time in. And I think the other piece of this is from an instrumental point of view, it's very, very rich to be able to do this kind of work. And unfortunately, I think many people, and certainly younger people, are not really exposed to really, really fun, creative instrumental music anymore. It's just not something that's readily available. So we feel very passionately, and one of the things that we did, for example, on this album was mixing trombones. We have an alto flute. We're using flugelhorn. There's a soprano sax. There's an alto. There's a tenor. There's trumpet. and of course your rhythm section of piano, bass, and drums. And so we take an inordinate amount of time to really structure this instrumental framework because we love it, and we're hoping that other people will be as attracted to the instrumental component as we are.
Perfect, man. Josh, thank you for opening up about this album. Thank you for the music. It seems to be a summer yearly thing that we catch up with the new album, so good luck with it. It's always great to catch up with you.
Joe, thank you very, very much. Always a pleasure to be on Neon Jazz. You're carrying the torch, and I will look forward to continuing our dialogue.
Absolutely. Just standing on the shoulders of giants, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players and cats in New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Josh again for his time, his cool, and his stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.